Now, we had a setting before holding the external start signal called start via binary input. This option had two things inside, either 2-channel or 1-channel. As long as I choose 1 channel and go to the information routing, I won't notice anything strange here. You'll find here start block function CP defective. Let's just focus on this part, start, then block function, all right. So we had programmed the binary input with the virtual signal called start. If you choose 2-channel, something appears between start and block function called release. I need to add another input. What does it mean? It indicates breaker failure if you choose 1 channel. Release here means I will have to program a binary input again. And in this case, what does it tell you? It tells you that it means breaker failure if you are selected, and the meaning is S. Once the external initiation comes to the virtual signal called start, the breaker failure will begin to operate. However, if you select 2-channel, it means that for the breaker failure to be initiated, it needs 2 inputs to be activated, the start input and the release input. So, what does the manual tell me? The manual tells you that you have 2 channels and 1 channel. The 2-channel means that it is used if there is a danger that the circuit breaker failure protection causes a tripping due to a faulty activation of the start binary input. Used if there is an attempt to update. So, what could cause this to happen? It told you. The first thing is, for example, the pickup value, which is, for instance, dependent on the current being less than, for example. There are many times when you find the station's benefit, for example, 0.2 or 0.3 amperes, whereas the station's benefit is usually, for example, 0.8 or 0.9, whereas the station's benefit is usually, for example, 0.8. Very good. Well, he is afraid to proceed with these things without being completely sure that this is a case. And that is a case. So he told you in this situation, you use it so that you have either, of course, this will depend only on who. So he came back and told you that this release is essentially about. It is used with the pickup of another relay. What does another relay mean? For example, if we look here at this diagram, you will notice here that this is your feeder entering here on the relay that has a circuit breaker failure. It enters with the position of the breaker and you receive the start or initiation of your... Nice, very good. Okay, and also, where does it come from? You have another one. There is another thing. What is it? And from its pickup, I start to take this and send it here to the system. So here, the idea of the pickup is not a trip. Of course, if it only brings a pickup by itself, it won't do anything for me because I need both the start input and the release. I won't take the release from the trip. I'll take the release from the pickup. So here, I just feel that there is indeed a problem that has occurred. Therefore, I need to activate the breaker failure. So here, the idea of the 2 channels is that I will add a new signal or another virtual input that must work, which is the release I take from the pickup of one of the protection functions present in the external protection device. But let's look at a very important point. It says, another common configuration is the parallel wiring of the external trip initiation to both binary inputs, start and release. This means if you don't have this case and you chose 2 channels, you will take the same input and send it to both the start and the release. So why not just make it 1 channel, right? But in this case, it becomes the start via binary input. Therefore, the applications we use on site are the 1 channel. Very good. Then we move on. Now I've understood how to do it, we've understood this and we've also understood what it means. The configuration for the internal initiation and the internal initiation. We understood the internal initiation in terms of 1 channel and 2 channels. And we also understood what holding an external start signal means. Okay? The input has come and it will start counting the time. We will begin to see whether the breaker appears closed, dead, or open to determine if the breaker failure is operating or not. Here, I want you to understand very, very, very well, because people receive something called breaker failure, which gets a pickup and a dropout. Naturally, when initiation comes to me as a result of some fault, whether internal or external, you start having something that informs you whether the breaker is closed, so the breaker failure operates, or something tells you that the breaker has opened, so the breaker failure does not operate. Here, I will have two options. One is called the circuit breaker auxiliary contact criteria load, and you have something called dropout. Now let's understand what these details mean. Very good. Let's now look at the topic of the pickup and dropout settings specific to circuit breaker failure protection. For pickup, there's an option called circuit breaker auxiliary contact criteria with two choices: no, or with circuit breaker position closed 3 pull. Circuit breaker failure protection has two. Great. Now we all know that circuit breaker failure protection has two modes. One is called the current mode, and the other is called the low current mode or low current mode. What does this mean? It means that the circuit breaker failure receives initiation. This initiation, when it comes, can have more than one source. All right? Very good. This source could be a protection function related to the flow of electric current, such as differential, distance, overcurrent, earth fault, and other protection functions. And there are other protection functions like undervoltage and overvoltage, among others, which do not necessarily involve the flow of electric current. Also, there are mechanical protections found on transformers and generators. In this case, we call it low current mode or without current mode circuit breaker failure. What is the difference between the two when I receive an initiation to check whether the breaker is still closed or has opened? How do I know? Well, for the current mode, you are supposed to measure the current. Okay, in the low current mode, as we agreed, for example, I received an oil low level alert on the transformer. It is not necessarily that the transformer is energized from both sides. It could be that its upstream is closed and the downstream is open, and therefore there is no load on the transformer and no current is actually passing through. However, having a protection function like oil low level active or is very dangerous. Why? Because the ZTL means that the winding is without insulation, which could later lead to a complete breakdown. In this case, if I rely on the current reading, I won't know whether the breaker is closed or not. On the contrary, I would think the breaker is open because the current is low. In this situation, I must rely on the state of the breaker. Nice. I don't currently see in front of me a circuit breaker auxiliary contact criteria. I just don't see the word current. So let's go to the manufacturer's manual. What did the relay manual say? It said that after you get the initiation, the relay checks whether the breaker is still closed. How does it check? Through the current flow criteria or the circuit breaker's auxiliary contact status? The circuit breaker and its auxiliary contact status. So, what does the relay tell you? It tells you that even if the circuit breaker's auxiliary contact is permitted, meaning you have written this function here, you have set this criterion. It says even if you have set this criterion, it will give preference to the idea of the current flow criteria, meaning it will measure this current as a priority for it. What does this mean, as a priority for it? In summary, this part means that even if the auxiliary contact tells you that the breaker is open, but there is current, then no way the breaker is definitely closed, no doubt about it. Therefore, it always sees a current flow criteria as the effective criteria for it. This means that if there is current, then definitely the breaker is closed. However, the idea of the auxiliary contact might not be reliable. The signal could be wrong, or there might be an issue with the auxiliary contact on the circuit breaker, whatever the case may be. So, what is generally preferred to use? Generally speaking, what is actually applied in stations is that the current mode monitors the current. If you have a case for the current mode, then we write the breaker status. As a recommendation, I suggest using both, as long as the relay has the dominant criteria or the effective criteria, which is the current. So even if the circuit breaker auxiliary contact is giving a wrong signal and indicates that it is open, as long as there is current, I will take the current as a reference. Okay, in the case where there is no current, and let's say this source is coming to me, or that is coming to me as a result of something, then okay, the existing one is correct, right? Very good. All right, let's go back here again. So now, if we do it, it means you are telling it to check only the current. But if you tell it, it also means you can check on, but if the current is higher than your value, then of course, even if the breaker comes to you open, it means the current is the one making the decision. If you don't have current, then at that time you should look at who. Is the breaker closed or not? This is regarding the pickup of the circuit breaker, failure. As for the dropout, well, here the dropout means what? It means, okay, now I have received an initiation. As a result of a protection function working, maybe the breaker opened, right? Or am I wrong? In this case, I should know if the breaker didn't operate. How do I know if the breaker opened? Here you have the two available options. Criteria with auxiliary contact and current criteria. These are the two options available to you.